back to the Race German YouTube channel. I want to thank everyone who watched the previous video before this, the introduction. I know it's kind of boring, but I think it was the best way to get into all this and kind of explain about Race German and who I am and things like that. But so if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to go watch that. It's like a 6-minute video, and I'll put the link in the description below. But today we're going to install Condor Speed Shop Power Steering Delete. A lot of people ask me about this, what's the purpose of it, how to install it, things like that. So I'm going to get into that a little bit later in the video. But the real reason why I'm doing this is because of my M52 V28. So there's kind of a special scenario here. Before this engine I had the M50 V25 and I ran power steering the whole time in this track car. So it's a little bit different. Let's get into why I'm actually deleting the power steering pump. Alright, let's get into this. So I put the M52 B28 in this car. The one thing I did not realize about this engine, and it's only on the 2.8 liter that came in the E36 328i and the 528i, is that it uses a special power steering pump right here. So it doesn't use the same power steering pump that's on the M50 or the M52 B25 or S52 or S50. So it uses a special power steering pump. So I didn't know that. I had to go on eBay. I bought a power steering pump, everything like that. Bolts right up. It's a good power steering pump. It works. I went on FCP Euro, but the hoses I thought I needed, I got them in. I tried to bolt it all up, and it doesn't work. So because of the different orientation of the power steering pump inlets and outlets, I decided, because this is a track only car and because I really don't drive this on the road, that I'm just going to install the E30 power steering delete from Condor Speed Shop. A lot of people ask me about this, and you have to remember too that BMW in Europe actually offered the E30 without power steering. So my E30 Touring over here actually was a power steering-less car, never came with it. So it's going to feel the exact same way, and I'll get into the feel and stuff like that later. But this is going to be a pretty simple install, and I'll go through that. But along with that, since I'm deleting the power steering pump, I actually had to order a shorter belt. So I'll put the part numbers and everything like that in there, but let's go over what's going to take to install this. Alright, so what exactly are we going to go over in this video? I want to start out with the background of this power steering delete. Like I said, a lot of people ask me about it. How did it come about? Condor was kind of the first one to do it, so I'm going to go over the background, and then I'm going to go over the install of the product. I'm going to go over pros, cons, and then finally, is it worth it, and also how it kind of feels when you're driving. So let's get into this. Alright, so the E30 power steering system is actually pretty simple. So I'm going to draw this real quick. But the E30s have a rack and pinion, right? Here we go. These are your tires. And with that rack and pinion, you have a power steering pump that's on your engine, obviously. And then you have your reservoir that has an input and an output. Alright, so what happens here is you have one line from the reservoir that goes to the pump. That feeds the pump, and then there's another line that goes, pressure line, that goes from the pump to the power steering rack. And then finally, there's another line from the power steering rack back to the reservoir. So you're just looping it. So with the Condor Speed Shop power steering delete, we're actually taking away the reservoir, all the lines, the pump, and just leaving the rack. So then we end up putting the power steering delete block on the rack, and I'll get into that right now. Alright, so they developed a power steering delete block. It's a simple block like this. Just two holes. that bolts onto the power steering rack. When you turn the wheel on the rack goes back and forth. So fluid is transferring from one side to the other, and you have seals and there's air and there's fluid that builds up pressure. So what makes this possible, instead of just blocking off the power steering rack, and if you did that, the pressure inside would actually build up and you'd blow your seals out. So you actually need the fluid and the air in the rack to move as you turn the steering wheel. And that's exactly what this does. So it's a UHMW block, and with the two holes, but there's channels in these holes drilled into the block. Like this. So we use the OEM banjo bolts that go in, but when you turn the wheel, this allows actually the fluid to transfer through this block and go back and forth. And you need that, like I said, because otherwise you would build up pressure on either side of it and you end up blowing the seals and the rack would just spill fluid all over the place. Alright, now that you have a little background, let's get into the install and see what we need to do. Alright, here's what we need to install the power steering delete. First, you need the Condor Speed Shop power steering delete block. It comes with brand new washers, crush washers for the banjo bolts. You're going to need a smaller serpentine belt because we're obviously taking off the power steering pump. 3/8 ratchet, 19mm wrench, a 22mm wrench, flathead screwdriver, and 13mm socket, and another socket for the tensioner for the belt. Alright, before we get started, I'm going to remove the radiator and the serpentine belt so we can get more access to show you that, and then we'll remove the power steering pump and then install the block. So here we go. Alright, so obviously if you're doing this install and taking it off your power steering pump, you're going to have the lines here. Since I never connected those lines, you're going to have to connect the two lines here that go to the power steering pump and then your reservoir right here. But to get this out, I need to first remove the pulley. Next, there's two 13mm bolts up here that you're just going to want to remove. With the power steering pump removed, we have access to the power steering rack. And those are your two banjo bolts, so I'm going to remove those, and then we're going to go install the Condor Speed Shop power steering delete. Alright, like I stated earlier in the video, this is the Condor Speed Shop power steering delete. And as you can see, here's the block, but that has the two holes drilled in it here, and they go through, and this allows, like I said, the fluid and the air to move back and forth in the rack as you turn the steering. They do provide you with brand new crush washers for the banjo bolts, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, here it is installed. Because this is UHMW, we're not going to follow the factory torque specs because you don't want to crush the material. So Condor Speed Shop actually calls out for you to torque these to 15 foot-pounds. But honestly, if you don't have a torque wrench, you just want to snug them up just enough so it doesn't leak. So tighten them up by hand, and then we're going to take a wrench and just snug them up a little bit, and that should be it. Alright, there's the install. Very simple to do. Now let's get back to the front of the engine and install the serpentine belt. Alright, and that's it. So the new serpentine belt is on. Kind of hard to see. There it is. I still need to remove the power steering reservoir, which is two 13mm nuts down there, or bolts down there. I'll take that right out. But that's pretty much it for the install. Like I said, a super simple install. And now let's get back to the rest of the video, going over the pros and cons and if it's even worth it or not. Alright, so we're back. We're done with the install. It was very simple, like I said, just follow those easy directions. Now let's get to the pros and cons of this. So this is probably the number one question I'm asked about the Condor Power Steering Delete. A lot of people DM me and say, why would you even do it? I mean, it really doesn't make sense, right? If you have a perfectly working power steering system, why would you take that out? And I 100% agree with you. If your power steering system is working in perfect order, keep it. If there's no leaks, the pump's running good, things like that, keep your power steering. It still feels great on track. Like I said, I've used power steering on my track car for 5 or 6 years now. It still feels great on track, so I probably wouldn't do it. So, what are the pros of deleting the power steering then? Pros are simplicity, right? So we're simplifying the system by taking out the power steering pump, the reservoir, and all the fluid and stuff like that. So no leaks and things like that. Another pro, some would say, is maybe a little more horsepower because you're not turning other accessories. So I'm going to put it, but probably pretty negligible, right? So not too much, but it is a pro. The last pro I would say would be driving feel. So with the power steering deleted, you're not going to have a lot of the feel from the steering wheel soaked up by the belt, the power steering pump, the fluid, things like that. It's going to be a lot more direct feeling when you're driving in the car. So on track or on the road, at speed, you're going to feel a lot more of the road. You're going to feel a lot more connected to it. So I'm going to say another pro is driving feel. Alright, so let's get to cons. A big con of this is obviously no power steering. I mean, you're deleting it. Power steering is there to help the input of the steering. So the biggest con of this of doing this is below 15 miles an hour, it's not going to be that fun. So you're going to have to put in extra input to turn the wheel. Parallel parking turns into a problem, things like that. If you're doing this on a track car, obviously it's not a huge deal because you're not driving around in the city, you know, parallel parking or doing slow motion turns. So I would say this is by far the biggest con of doing this mod. But at the same time, it's really not that bad. Like I said, my E30 Touring, it wasn't an option in the US. All USA cars came with power steering, but the cars in Europe had the option. So my E30 Touring did not even come with power steering at all. So I kind of got used to it, and that's kind of a big driving factor why I decided to do it on the track car and not actually just find the right hoses to fit. I've been driving the E30 Touring now for a little over a year without power steering, and it's, like I said, at below 15 miles an hour, 10-15 miles an hour, it's not that fun, but it's not so bad where you're like, man, I really wish I had power steering. So all in all, let's wrap this up and see if it's worth it. Alright, so is it worth it? Yes and no, right? So with everything, there's compromise. The power steering delete is, I believe, $25. So it's a very cheap or cost-effective mod to do. Like I said, I would only do the power steering delete if your power steering is not working properly. If you don't want to spend the money on new pressure hoses, a new power steering pump, things like that, this is a very good option. Another reason to go this route is for track cars. A lot of track cars, if you get a power steering leak on the track or a line blows or something like that, they don't want the fluid on the racetrack because obviously that causes a slippery scenario for the people behind you. So I would say this is more of a track-focused modification, but it's very doable on the street since I'm driving my E30 touring on the street every day. So is it worth it? Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's a very good solution. I like what they did with the block and drilling the holes to really come up with a solution so you don't blow your seals and things like that. So that's it, and if you want to buy the Condor Speed Shop Power Steering Delete, we do sell them on our website. I'll put the link in the description below. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email or direct message us on Instagram, and we'll be glad to help. Thanks a lot.